Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. It feels like legacy factions are never far from being a hot topic in Warhammer the Old World, and I've been doing some thinking and chatting to some friends about whether we might see them in a different way in the future. Is there a backdoor way that some of these factions could return to the game?
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club, your event or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
I'm very aware that conversations around legacy factions is something that's incredibly common and been covered by myself many times before, and of course lots of other content creators and podcasters who cover Warhammer the Old World. I've got no intention today of getting down into the weeds of the quality, the competitiveness, the compatibility of the current legacy army lists within the wider community and how they fit with the 1.5 whatever meta we have going on. But I will say is that regardless of what happens in the future, for me these are armies that are part of the Warhammer world, and I will always play people who have legacy armies. I think we need to be honest with ourselves. There is a chance that those 7 factions may not come back to the game. I've always held the view that they probably will in one way or another, but as the game has gone on and we've seen how it's developed, there are certain things that have happened along the way that make me even start to doubt that kind of positive outlook towards it. The reality is really most of us just haven't got a clue what's going to happen in the future, and there's a really strong idea that even those at Games Workshop haven't fully decided the outcomes for all of those factions yet, and why the answer may be no now, but maybe by 4th or 5th edition we could see them all come back. Time will tell, and a lot of water under the bridge has to run before we fully know the outcome. But the exercise of this video is today to go through those 7 factions and briefly, you'll be pleased to note, give some ideas of how they may come back into the game, especially if they're not going to be coming back as a full faction. And in addition to that, I really want to know what you think, what your theories are, rumours you have heard. Please put them in the comments below. So let's get started, and remember this is just a little bit of fun. I'm just hypothesizing about how an army may come back, especially if it's not going to come back as a full faction. Maybe it will be just a couple of units appearing in another army list. Maybe it's going to be a smaller army of infamy to cover a particular theme rather than a full faction. That's the kind of ideas that I'm thinking about. Starting with Lizardmen, and I'll be honest here, we're going to start on a bit of a negative footing. Not that I've got anything against Lizardmen whatsoever, but it feels like a faction that they can ignore if they want to. Now, don't throw things at me if you're a fan of Lizardmen. They are great, and you can easily work them into the narrative. You can work any faction into the narrative if you wanted to. You just tell a story and you put them in there. We've already seen after the scope growing from just the old world to include Cathay, that anything can be achieved in this game if they want to do it and have the time to do it. But the way I look at the development at the moment and all the different plates they are spinning and where the narrative is being most focused, I can't really see why they would stretch things even more to include Lizardmen in it. It feels like a faction that would be easy to ignore for another time, and that's why I don't think we're going to see these anytime soon. In fact, they're probably bottom of the list of any of the legacy factions for me. Now, for fun, could we see a mercenary unit appear? Yes, maybe. That could be the sort of thing we see. Maybe a Dogs of War style of unit. That could be fun, but are we going to see them beyond that? I don't think so. As I've already said, an army of infamy, I think that's even a little bit too much of a stretch. You could have some kind of Lizardmen pirates off the coast of Cathay or something like that. But again, it's too much for me. I don't think we'll see them at all. Dark Elves. Now, for me, this is much more likely, and I'm going to say this again, and I've said it millions of times before. The very first day I opened my Warhammer the Old World book on launch day and started reading that introduction, Dark Elves are mentioned along with the other 9 at the time at launch factions. Nothing else. What it felt like that they were late emissions from the game, and I think they were fully meant to come back. Just an opinion. I feel that that's the case. And there's been rumours about them on and off over the whole time of the game, and very recently with some of the Daughters of Cain stuff for AOS being revealed. What it did reveal is that in the Spearhead, some of those witch models, the old witch models, are still being used by Age of Sigmar. So that whole theory that I had as well, that they were going to re-release all the Daughters of Cain stuff, meaning that the older models could all be free to be brought out for Warhammer the Old World. There's still a problem there. There's still going to be a little bit of a clash. I think I've not gone through the whole roster and checked all the units and which ones will be missing, but I think the Cauldron of Blood is quite a central piece, and that's still going to be used in Age of Sigmar. So there are some issues there, and there's very few miniatures that are used in both games. I think we have some dwarves, some dwarves, and the tree spirits at the moment, which are just not pictured or mentioned at all in Warhammer the Old World, apart from being in the army list. I'm sure there's other examples as well. So it feels like that whole faction return may not be on the cards because of that, but could we have something else? Maybe a pirate themed raiding force might be a really nice way of doing it, leaving the witch elements out. Maybe it'll just be a Dark Elves full release with 2 armies of infamy, but still with no witches. But if you wanted to bring it back in part for now, some kind of army of infamy in an arcane journal, which maybe had another small race in, would be really, really good. And in the last arcane journal for Cathay, there's talk in the lore a little bit about pirates and things in the East, and it could be a really, really fun way of doing it, along with another one of these legacy factions. So you bring them back in part, get the factions back into the game. Now, what that would do to the legacy list, I don't know. It might mean that they kind of scrap it off, which would be a shame, because some people might want to still play the legacy army. And again, if people wanted to play their witch elves and wanted to play a full legacy dark elf army against me, I would always happily play it. But it is a way that you could start seeing some of these miniatures repackaged and brought back and sold as part of the old world line. And I think dark elves have got one of the best chances out of all of those legacy armies of returning in some way, even if it's a slightly reduced list. And for me, dark elves, there's just so many ways they could do it. Be that a mercenary unit, a dogs of war unit, a restricted or reduced army list without the witches as an army of infamy, build as pirates or raiders or something like that, or even just a full faction release coming back and dealing with that kind of slightly messy witch miniatures for witch range stuff is okay for a little bit. Who knows how it works out? I'd love the latter. I'm sure most people would love the latter, but I've got a feeling they will come back. I'm confident they will. I think it's more likely to be some kind of trimmed down version of the list though. What about Skaven? Something that's hugely popular in all editions of Old Fantasy. A really strong player base, really strong fan base for them, as something that really signifies Warhammer to so many people. I absolutely love them. I'm going to be building an army for them this year, regardless of whether they're legacy forever or not. But I've got some real concerns about how they would bring them back into the game. Most of the miniatures range is now free. The old miniatures range is now free, and I'm sure that the few remaining things like the Plague Monks will eventually become free as well. So the miniatures are there. It's whether there's space in the storyline to do it. So I'm really torn on this. A lot of it I can see is that there's no restrictions at all, but we don't know what's going on in the back end Games Workshop, the business decisions made around splitting these IPs and the accounting stuff. Again, most of these miniatures seem free. They could bring them back. It could be a full army release. But I can also see a world where they're very nervous about how strong they are for the Age of Sigmar IP, meaning that Old World just doesn't get them, which would be really, really sad. So are there other ways they could come back? I think we could see them in a really negative way. If we lose that full army list, we could see them come back as a bit of an ally to Chaos. I'm sure we're moving towards that Great War of Chaos, and there's going to be some funky arcane journals coming out focused on Chaos as we get closer to that. Whether that will be this edition or later on, I'm not sure. None of us are sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was a restricted smaller amount of Skaven allied to Chaos. Maybe they start to show themselves, because at the moment they're very hidden in the Empire. They start to show themselves as Chaos attacks more and more. So narratively you could definitely do it. There's lots of old miniatures there that should be available to return to Warhammer the Old World, but there's just a little bit of warning in my heart that says that they're so popular in Age of Sigmar and they really want to separate those streams of IP that they're worried about there being too much of confusion and crossover. And I hope there is never a business decision made that way. For me, those games are joined. That's the whole point of them. They should be proud of the connections between the two IPs. One comes from the other. It's one continuing story. So just do it. But I also get that things might not happen like that from a business perspective. I'm worried about them. As much as I love them, I'm really worried about them. I think it's far more likely that Dark Elves will return in full. But I hope that Skaven get their own army rather than just being a bit of an ally of chaos. But that could be the future. A few units in a chaos army of infamy. Ogre Kingdoms. Well, we know ogres are alive and well in the lore as well. In Warhammer the Old World, we've got ogre loaders in the Cathay army list, and there's talk of ogres being used as mercenaries, but also threatening their borders. In fact, you can take Badlands ogres in the latest Army of Infamy as well. So they're definitely around. But I'm sure, like me, most of you want to see them more than just an allied unit here or there. Want to see them as a list. And again, it comes down to the miniatures. There's rumours around the miniatures being freed up as they're replaced and refreshed for Age of Sigmar. If that's the case, then maybe we will see them. Again, these are another one of those that it feels like they might be an Army of Infamy, a slightly reduced list from what we're used to, where some of those units are used in the future. That would be really, really cool if it happens. I think there's a good chance we will see them, but whether we see a full faction ogres, I don't know yet. I think we'll see more than we've got now, though. Whether that's new miniatures redesigned and a backdoor way of getting them in the game, I'm really not sure, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to be seeing them in the game, and I think we'll see some new miniatures as well. They've sculpted those loaders. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of new plastic kit for sort of mercenary ogres or something like that, or pirate ogres. It would be really fun and really cool. I think we're going to start to see some of the factions like that return to the game in a slightly different flavour, but that doesn't help people who want to play their Ogre Kingdoms armies that they've had from 8th edition outside of Legacy, which is, again, is a problem. So I hope that we'll see them back fully, but I also fear we might see a reduced army list turning up as an Army of Infamy or some more allied mercenary units or that kind of thing. Vampire counts, and this is a tricky one. They're clearly hugely popular, always were, and they're clearly a huge part of Age of Sigmar in their new forms now as well. And I'm pretty sure there are enough old miniatures that most of the roster could come back to the game, but it does feel like there's a real problem with that kind of IP crossover when there's not enough of a difference. It's essentially the same army in two different games, and it offers a cheaper alternative maybe to certain miniatures, and that can be a bit of a head scratcher. Most of the new factions we've seen are different, aren't they? They're not something that can appear in Age of Sigmar. Yes, you could probably use Cathay as a different theme, City of Sigmar, and I'm sure someone has or someone will, but it's a little bit harder when it's an old fantasy faction that can clearly be used as both things. And I don't know what their business is thinking of, but I've got some concerns for this as well. I just don't think they're going to allow vampire counts to return as a full faction. I think there'll have to be a backdoor route if they're going to do it. So what could those backdoor routes be? You could have a completely new version of Vampire Counts. The Vampire Coast stuff has been rumoured for quite some time, and it's something that SDS seem to be happy to go off in the route of using things that they've worked with Creative Assembly for Total War. So that could happen. It would be fun, and I'm sure lots of people would like it. We may also see something with Mousillon or different smaller Army of Infamy again solution for it. So be that with Arcane Journal number 3 for Bretonnia, maybe there's a good list, and maybe there's a slightly evil list of characters brought back. That could happen. We've got those bits on the map. They've been on the map since the beginning of the game, and I think that would be a way of doing it, with some limited miniatures are returned and you're expected to do a little bit of kit bashing with Empire or Bretonnian miniatures or something like that as well. So there's a couple of solutions there to get something that's vampire count themed back into the game, which would be really fun. But again, whether that would be something that the game would then accept as the way to play a vampire counts themed army, or people still want to play their legacy main faction. And that could be the excuse the Games Workshop needs as well, to drop some of these legacy armies, or say, well, we've brought them back into the game thematically, even if it's not the full army that was there before. I'm not sure that'll go down very well, but it's definitely something that wouldn't surprise me if it happened in the future. Demons of Chaos, and demons have been a bit of a discussion point across a lot of game systems, and I don't know if it's because Games Workshop are trying to clean up some of the visuals and the imagery and the stories around their games to make them more suitable for some younger players. There are certain things in Chaos's past which were definitely a little bit more titillating or a little bit more gruesome in ways that they probably wouldn't do now. Even some of the new witch elves that they've shown for Age of Sigmar have got clothes on now where they didn't have before. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, not to objectify in that way as well. It makes sense, especially when you're trying to sell your games to younger people, and there might be some problems with Chaos in that way. Again, I've got a feeling that Chaos will come back as an ally to the Warriors of Chaos as part of the Great War against Chaos. I'm not necessarily sure they need to bring them back as a full faction. And I'm sorry, I'm not having a go at Demons of Chaos players. I hope they do come back as that, and I hope they are playable. I've got a feeling they're more likely to come back as different god-themed armies of infamy that allowed certain units to come back, designed to be thematic and maybe ally with your main Warriors of Chaos armies or additions to that. I feel like that's the way they'll do it, rather than bring back a standard Demons of Chaos faction, bringing back all of the old entries. Again, I might be completely wrong, because that could work as well. They might just need cleaning up and tidying up. But if they do it in the allied route or the smaller additions or armies of infamy, then it feels like they could leave out things that they didn't have miniatures for anymore, that they felt was problematic or they don't want to touch, and still get some of that Demons of Chaos theme into the game, but without doing it most directly. And finally, Chaos Dwarves, last but not least, unless you're talking about height, of course. Now, they've kind of had their release, non-release anyway, with the return or the emergence of them in Age of Sigmar. Some great miniatures there that can be used and covered and converted into your armies for Warhammer the Old World. But obviously that's not a proper release. It's still a legacy army. And again, are we going to see them return as a faction? I really don't know with this one. It feels like something that SDS could have gone after, having had Chaos Dwarves before in their ownership with Tamokan. I also feel that the units they may have brought back, those all resin units, would now not be part of the game because they're all resin. I think the game is growing well enough, and it's been decided that let's have mostly plastic releases moving forward. And we've not seen any full resin units brought back, only the odd new resin character. So I think the chances of them remastering those old units and bringing them back to the game, with the way the game's growing, because the game's doing better, I can't see that anymore. And that might mean it's a little bit harder to see Chaos Dwarves coming back. And also, with them being so new to Age of Sigmar, you have to ask the question about whether they could be allowed to bring them back for Warhammer the Old World with all new sculpts. Now, I just don't see it. I don't see a path to them coming back any time soon. Now, again, like some of the other factions, you may see some units returning as allies as part of the Great War against Chaos. So an Army of Infamy version of them with some units, or some allied units or mercenary units for Chaos only, could be a way that they bring them back without having to bring back a whole new faction. I'm sure it's something they would have loved to have done, and maybe now they can't because these different studios obviously got their own plans. Pretty confident that they don't share those future plans with each other as well. So who knows? At the beginning of Warhammer the Old World, it felt like, well, that'd be a sensible one to bring back because it's something the main studio hasn't done, and I wonder if they've been a little bit hoodwinked by the AOS release. And I don't know that for sure. I just wonder if that was something with a little bit of a forehead meets desk moment when they found out, because I'd be surprised if they hadn't planned it. It makes sense for the location of them near Cathay as well, and potential for hobgoblins and all those things. So narratively it makes so much sense they would come back, but with that AOS release I just think it makes it so much harder. So how do you do it? Maybe a unit, as I said, here or there as an allied unit or something like that, and then hope to grow them in the future. So much of this video is quite depressing when you remove the emotion from wanting all of those factions booked, which I do. And I know I'm going to get comments saying, but this is blah, 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 AOS, blah, blah, blah. I'm not arguing against that. And please don't misunderstand any of this video. I'm trying to remove some of the emotion and the heart from what I'd like to see with that cold hard. Well, how will Games Workshop handle this? How are they most likely to handle this from a business perspective and a resourcing perspective with a very small team that they have as well? This is a lot of work to bring all of these back, and when you've got restrictions with what they're able to do when it comes to IP and accounting, then it makes it really, really hard as well. So are there ways they could get around that? And that's why so many of my potential solutions and ideas might be a little bit on the light side. Are they going to come back as a reduced list and an army of infamy? And then the fear will be from me, and I'm sure many of you, that if we got a dark elf raiding corsair fleet army of infamy list, which would be amazing, but does that mean then as a new edition rolls around that suddenly that dark elf legacy list is gone completely? Because if you want to play dark elves, you have to play this new flavour of reduced army, and that may well be the way it ends up, which would be sad, but also nice from a slightly negative point of view to see factions living on in the new timeline just through different means. And again, at the risk of upsetting some people, I know this would upset some people when it's your main faction being talked about in this way, but some of those legacy factions I think will be fine as an army of infamy or as a large allied force to some of the bigger factions. I've said it. So Demons of Chaos is a prime example of that. For me, Chaos is a big overriding group of different factions, and for me the story for Demons of Chaos can be told within the story of Warriors of Chaos and Beasts of Chaos and all those other things. If there's a way of playing them on their own for an army of infamy, that's great as well. I'm sorry to those people who want their full army list and want two different armies of infamy for them as well. I get it. I'm not saying it's not worthy of it, but at risk of not having them at all and having them in a slightly different way, for me, that works. Whereas there are some factions who I think are sorely missed from the game. And I think Skaven are one of those, and Vampire Counts is another. And I think the game is poorer for not having those two in more than it is for not having Demons of Chaos. If Demons of Chaos, for example, could be armies of infamy or units brought in as allies to the Warriors of Chaos, if that makes sense. I know that's an awful lot of rambling there. Skaven would definitely start coming back to the old world at this time, and the old lore they did. They return for the Great War against Chaos, and I think it's a lot harder to cover the full Skaven armies and how that group, that nation, that faction would react at that instant if it was only as an allied unit to Warriors of Chaos, whereas Demons is easier to do that with. And the same with Vampire Counts. They're just a little bit dormant, and they would definitely be coming back for a Great War against Chaos. And I think if they end up just being an Army of Infamy or a Musalon small list or a Vampire Count small list, I think their absence will be felt. So I really hope that those two, for me, are the most important to make it feel most Warhammer-ish, where some of the other factions could come back as armies of infamy or new flavours, ways of doing it. Ogre, pirates, that kind of thing. And it's sad that they're not back in full, but it feels like they're still in the game a lot more. But these two behemoths of factions, these really, really popular factions of Skaven and Vampire Counts, they're a lot harder to kind of squeeze in around the edges and turn into smaller things. So that's it. Probably upset an awful lot of people. And again, I'm not trying to draw judgment on any of those factions. I miss them. I want them all back. I've said this 100 times in the video. Again, if you've watched to this point, you've missed that. I'm sorry. It's not about that at all. I'm just trying to discuss and open up the discussion of what might happen if they can't bring all of those factions back as full factions. How might they go about it? And hopefully this gives some ideas. So let me know in the comments below what you think. What rumours have you heard? What do you hypothesise? And if you've enjoyed the video, give it a like, drop a comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. If you'd like to support me and the channel even further, please check out my Patreon. It starts all the way from £1, $1, wherever you are in the world. Very, very cheap for the lowest tiers. So it's a great way of supporting me, helping me continue to make content like this and the stuff that I do more often, all the painting tutorials and the reviews and stuff as well. Please also check out my channel sponsor, Counterattack Bases. Loads of great gaming aids and custom dice. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.